welcome to another edition of the Zoom with Our Feet podcast, the pod about learning photography. With me, your host, TMac, a professional photographer, videographer, and teacher. We hit for the cycle on this episode of the ZoomPod. Sony ambassador, baseball photographer, grassroots baseball co-founder, and documentary director Jean Fruth joins me to talk about her journey and the art of storytelling. Our guest speaker is in the photo lab. Let's talk to a pro. Jean Fruth, welcome to the Zoom with Our Feet podcast.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. Finally, we arrived.
I'm excited to have you. So I always start at the very, very beginning. So how did your photography journey start?
Well, my photography journey started where I thought I wanted to work in a darkroom, which is, I guess, shows you how smart I am. I worked with these two women that were doing all black and white portrait photography, and they were printing on beautiful paper, and it was all on location, that we added a studio a bit later. And I learned printing, like the beginning of darkroom work, in high school, and I was just fascinated with it. And so I offered to do their printing in exchange for going on shoots with them and learning more. And at the same time, I was taking classes and trying to figure out what path I wanted to take. And I didn't set out to be a portrait photographer, but it was where the opportunity lent itself to become a professional photographer. And I learned so much from these two women and printed a lot of their work, and then eventually started going on shoots with them and then having my own shoots. And it was a great start to the journey because, as you know, portrait photography is probably one of the most difficult things to do, is taking a portrait, connecting with a person. And that early start has served me well, like right up until today, even though I knew that wasn't really the path. And I did all kinds of other things too. I worked with food photographers, wedding photographers, landscape photographers. I was trying to figure it out. And then when sports presented itself as an option, I never looked back. Like that feeling that I got shooting like my first game for a local newspaper, I'll never forget it. And I actually was horrible at it, but I loved it. I was shooting baseball, and that I understood and knew how. And I thought I could shoot football, and that definitely took me a little longer to learn and figure out. But absolutely loved sports photography from the very beginning.
So, and this always dates people. Very first camera, how did you get it, and what did you shoot with it?
I worked, very first camera, I didn't really have aspirations for being a professional photographer, but my dad would get cameras in all kinds of ways that didn't involve really much of his money, whether it was finding or getting hand-me-downs or all kinds of ways that he got cameras. I was interested. He was doing underwater photography, and he built his own housing. So I got a chance to play around a little bit with that. So I don't have like a memory of a first camera in my hand and can tell you a brand. But the early cameras was more of a fascination and a hobby and an interest, than it being a profession.
And then the follow-up is, how did you, I feel like most photographers are self-taught. How did you learn the exposure triangle, the basics, aperture, shutter speed, ISO?
Yeah, I was a combination of self-taught, but also a lot of classes too. Like the technical part of photography is never I wasn't a naturally technical person. And so in my early days of being mentored, I wasn't around the most technical people either. Like probably one of the most influential photographers in my career was Michael Zagaris. And anytime I had a question about camera settings, he'd say, go ask somebody else about that. that's not my, and that was kind of it, from him. So, but everybody along the way, I had a lot of helpful people like in my life, even when I was on a big stage early on, and still needed help with those kind of things. I had, good photographers or very giving photographers around me that helped me figure it all out.
Do you have a favorite camera lens combination? What is it and why?
Yeah, I'd say that's actually pretty easy. It's the Sony A1 and the 70 to 200. And that combination for me is just the workhorse. And it's because the 7200 with that focal range, I mean, it's just gives you so many options, right? So it's a 70 to 200, 2.8, of course, because I'm a 2.8 junkie. Um, and the A1, what that does is it also allows you to go beyond your range with the 70 to 200 because the files are so big that you can crop in significantly and still have a file big enough for really all your uses. And that's a big deal for me, especially if I have to have one camera, one lens on a shoot for some reason. It's that lens, and I can take portraits with it. I could go wide and show a sense of place, or I can go tight on the action, all with one camera, one lens. So yeah, that's
So started in portrait, learned I'm sure not only portrait work, but also the photography business, right? You learned they were running a business, correct?
yeah, that's true. I don't even think about that, and but that was a lot of what I learned. I mean, just even scheduling the shoots and pricing, and we were also doing framing and just paper choices and inventory. There was a lot that went into that. We even worked with some like high-end boutique schools and did things with that. And yeah, so there was I don't even think about it that way, but you're absolutely right. So you're learning the business of photography as well, and that all served me well. And the woman who, her name was Jean as well, and Jean, she was a good businesswoman. She did well, and she was beloved by so many. So she had a big clientele that she built up over many years.
How did the baseball work? So then you kind of find sports, or it finds you. How did that come about?
I was coaching my son in rookie ball, and not because I wanted to be a coach. There was just nobody who, I don't know, they lost their coach, or basically me and this other mom just said, okay, we'll do it. And rookie ball is before Little League, it's like T-ball kind of wrapped up with it's, the goal is to do no harm and to make sure everybody gets a snack. So I started doing that. It was a lot of fun. And then Little League called me and they asked if I'd be interested in coaching Little League. And I said, oh, my son would still be too young next year to go to Little League. And you don't want me as a coach. But they did because they didn't have women, or they wanted more women coaches. So they asked if they could train me. They'd put me with great coaches. And um, so I said yes. And I thought, okay, I'll give it a try. I moved my son into Little League and they took him young. And they put me with great coaches, and it was a great experience. And I found a place in Little League. It wasn't because of my incredible coaching, but the organization skills and other things, and the recruiter of coaches. Once Little League gets you, they don't let you go. So I was in there for 7 years coaching my son, but I was also just taking photographs, and I submitted photographs to a local newspaper, not of my son's team, but of one of the older Little League teams for All Stars. And they said, oh, you're obviously a professional photographer. We need somebody to shoot sports, high school and youth and college. And I was like, well, sure, I'll do that. And I went to my first Friday Night Lights game that Friday and started shooting high school football. And I was terrible at it. My first game, I had the wrong gear, and it was really dark. And you understand this, And at the time, I didn't have all of the nice gear that I have now, and low light was an issue. But I learned quickly and reached out to a friend who, after he stopped laughing, said, I've got someone to connect you with. And he connected me with Michael Zagaris, who is the 49ers photographer and the Oakland A's photographer. And so I started working with him. So I learned how to shoot high school football on the 49ers field. So it's pretty fortunate for me.
Yeah, much better lighting.
Yeah, yeah, it was a little bit better lighting. But now, I mean, gosh, the cameras now, what they can do, the dark end zone's not a problem, right? It's just such a pleasure.
How would you define your style or your aesthetic? What's a gene photo that everybody goes, that's that's Fruth.
I, I'd like to say it's telling stories, that you look at a photo and it's more than just action, and you look at it and it has a story to tell without a caption. Like you can look at it and say, oh, okay, this is here. You know, that sense of place. And I tend to shoot a little wider and want to, tell that story. So I'd like to think, or that's what I aspire to be, or is my photographs telling a story.
It's it's what I saw. If from, you know, a million miles away, I felt like or feel like that's part of teaching, is the storytelling part. You can get lost in the weeds of technology, but what story are you trying to tell in the image?
Yeah, it is for me too. And I think great photos, right, don't need captions. It tells the story. Man, look at what came out of the Olympics. Some of my friends who were shooting there, and it was so fun to follow along on social media and see what they were shooting. And you see Steph Curry going up with his USA jersey on, and you see the Serbia player laying on the ground, despondent, and him cheering. And it's like, that photo. I wish I took that photo. That's a story. Terrific. Yeah.
So so how did you go from do no harm to shooting regularly and professionally? Where was that break? Is that a big break, that, or was it a series of small breaks?
Oh, as soon as I started shooting for local papers, I was shooting all the time. I just took every single assignment. And it's interesting because I was just talking to somebody about this, and it's like the same as the athletes. The guy who sits on the bench all the time and only has to come in, that's really hard to do, right? Like you have to be ready and you don't get any playing time, and then you're expected to perform and, like, get out there and get on base. And it's the players that play every day that get swings all the time, right? That they're honing their skills, they're getting better, they're ready. I think it's so much the same for photographers, is that you're out there shooting, 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 and whatever it is, like kids that are trying to make it out, like get out there and keep shooting. There's nothing like shooting every day to hone your skills. So, and I wasn't even thinking about it at the time. I just wanted to do it because I loved it so much. So I was shooting everything in every sports that I didn't know a lot about and sports that I did know a lot about. And of course, there's a big difference when you're shooting a sport that you know about versus one that you have no idea what you're looking at. And I did both, and those were good lessons. And I walked into high school wrestling, and I didn't have a clue. I mean, I was sending photos to the editor, and it was, I think this is a good picture. And that was the hardest one for me, was wrestling, because I was so afraid
When
of
they throw the
embarrassing.
towel in, literally.
It was, and then you're researching, like, what should it be? If I was going to take a good picture, what would it look like? You don't even know what it's supposed to be. Never mind trying to make it. So those are good lessons, to know, is that the more you know the sport, the more you shoot it, the better you're going to be, the more consistent you're going to get the shots, right?
All that time in really badly lit gyms teaches you how to make pictures, how to tell stories,
It's
right?
true. My only move was I'd sit next to the coach on that mat. That mat smelled. But I knew to go down low and make my picture. So I was down on that mat, and the kids would look up at the coach for guidance. So I was like, well, the local newspapers, they like to have faces, right? Faces are important. So at least I'd get a face if I wasn't getting much of anything else. But
So once you started working as a photographer, you were often running.
Yeah, it's all I wanted to do. It's all I still want to do. Yeah.
But at some point, you've done the big events, you've done the teams. Um, I can speak as an Ohioan. Some of your Cleveland Indians stuff is because that's my era, actually. When I was still working in television, we may have done games together
We
and
probably
not known
did.
it
Wow.
because I, being a local regional guy, did all of the playoffs and World Series in those three runs that they had. So if you were there for that, I was in one of those camera pits at some point.
Oh, right, had to be. And then when, yeah, Cleveland was playing Toronto, I was going back and forth and doing that drive. It's not that far, that drive from Cleveland to Toronto. Those playoffs were just terrific. And of course, the 2016 World Series was insane. Probably one of my favorite moments in baseball, shooting that World Series. Yeah, I know it didn't go your way. It should have. They were both great stories, though, right? They were both great stories. If it didn't rain, you would have won.
You can't take the Cleveland. You can take the boy out of Cleveland. So when did you say I want to do more though? When did a nonprofit idea project, how did it come about? When and how did you say to yourself, probably first, I this is what I want to do.
When I was working with the Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown, I was their traveling photographer, and I had a chance to meet a lot of Hall of Famers. So lucky for me, right, to take portraits of them, and then the projects became a little more far-reaching, and shooting Dave Winfield all his Silver Slugger awards, and fun projects like that. And then so getting to know them and getting to know their stories, and such interesting stories, and then the idea of all these amateur images, excuse me, that I'd been taking because I love the grassroots game. So that never went out of style for me, is like shooting, whether I'm in Japan shooting the World Baseball Classic, or shooting the Oakland A's. I love shooting Little League. I love shooting high school baseball. So I continued shooting what is really for my own personal project and my own personal images. And I thought, it'd be really cool to pair those images with these stories, with these Hall of Famers and where they grew up. I mean, I was shooting all over the world. So that was the idea for Grassroots Baseball Where Legends Begin, my first book. And the Hall of Famers were great. They all said yes, that they would tell their story. So these great essays, which made the book so special. Ricky Henderson talking about what it was like growing up in Oakland, playing football and baseball, and his mother wanting him to play baseball. Hank Aaron in Mobile, Alabama, starting in, the Negro Leagues and early days of then going into Major League Baseball. I mean, just terrific stories. And Ichiro Suzuki, and what it was like playing in Japan in the early days. So after that book came out, it was just, I was at a point in my life, at a point in my career, that giving back was something that I wanted to do, and wanted to start teaching like you're doing, and giving back to the craft I love, and giving back to the sport I love. And I really was at that point. So I was shooting other sports still, and I still do, but I love, baseball is, there's so much cultural, just connecting generations. That you just don't get that deep in other sports like you do in baseball. Or I know I'm biased, but um, so then the idea for the nonprofit came after that book, and I reached out to Jeff Idelson, who had just announced that he was retiring from the Baseball Hall of Fame as its president, and he was there for 26 years, and said, "What do you think of partnering with me?" And he was in the same boat of, like, he wasn't sure what direction he was going, and giving back to the sport that he loves, because nobody loves baseball more than Jeff. Was just a natural for him. So we said, okay, let's get this started. And we decided along Route 66 would be a great place to start the not for profit, right? It doesn't get more Americana than baseball on Route 66, and we did clinics for kids and partnered with Boys and Girls Club, and it was just a great beginning to the not-for-profit, and it just felt great, and it was 3 years along Route 66, and now our new venture, as you know, is women in baseball, and giving them visibility. It's more about that. Where the first project was more of introducing the game in underprivileged communities, and what that does for kids, who play sports, and better choices and better outcomes. This one is about gender equality and about giving women a platform and giving them more visibility. I mean, so many people don't even know that women play baseball.
And in that, I don't want to say transition, but in that evolution in your career, you you started getting more involved in the video side of things.
Yeah,
How
that
how, how did how did you how does a because I started in photography, found TV in college, graduated, worked, never really put photography away, but I pursued television, and then got tired of traveling, got a job teaching, and then kind of reintroduced myself back to still photography, which I'm doing now mostly. Um, how does a baseball photographer become the director of a baseball documentary?
well, first you have to lose all your marbles, I think, to get started. I mean, it was a big undertaking. How it came about was um, the project, as we delved into it, it's such a big subject, women in baseball, and you can go in so many different directions. And it was like, this project really needs video to tell the story. And it was just different, right, than a book, which we are doing, but it needed to be video, and it needed to it was a bigger story to tell, and I'm really glad that we pursued it in that direction. And I started practicing because, of course, these are new things for me. So it was okay, I want to do all the interviews, a woman in baseball interviewing women in baseball. So that was new, and doing those interviews, so I was interviewing women from the AAGPBL, the All American Girls Professional Baseball League, that are in their 90s now. There's some of these ladies left that played during World War II, interviewing executives, people off the field, on the field, and just learning how to do that. And then what that looks like as far as how to shoot it, and how to light it, and what's the backgrounds, and what's the look. We didn't really have a look we were going for. But so it took a while to figure all of that out. And it's interesting, as we cut the film now, there's still some of that early, I'd say, tests that we were doing, or practice, that will make it into the film. When I look at it and go, ooh, there's such a difference. But it's good. It makes me smile because I know how it progressed, and what I learned along the way. And like, that's really what it's about. I got into this project not because I was the expert, but because I was learning, and now learning so much about women in baseball, and learning how to do a project like this. And it's been very rewarding.
I always tell people that photography is good for the soul. How does photography make you feel?
Oh, it definitely just makes me, I don't want to sound so cliche, but it makes me feel alive. When I want to go out, there's something about, we just did the last shoot for the documentary, and my cinematographer, Martin, who I know he's feeling this too, because I've been talking to him on the phone. I know we're all exhausted, first of all, because we've been on the road and shooting, shooting, shooting. But there's also something, now we're editing, and that's amazing putting this together. But shooting and being out there, there's just nothing like that, especially shooting sports, because you can set up on shooting a documentary. You're not setting up the scene. You're not telling them, okay, do that again, slide into home, jump up, leap, do this. You have to let it all unfold. You have a plan, and then and then you have to be ready. And that is exhilarating. That is, just sports is it's photojournalism
Yeah,
that moves
storytelling.
moves very fast. Yeah. So
Yeah.
And yeah, and so that feeling, that alive feeling, and what's going to happen next, and the anticipation of that, and being ready, and the downs when you miss it, and the ups when you get it and you nail it, right? All of that, I'll take all of it, the ups and the downs. It's yeah.
I'm I'm sure um, at this point you've been asked many times, but I'm going to frame it from a teacher perspective. What you can do three things. You can do as many as you want. But what do you tell aspiring storytellers? Skills they need to know, experiences they need to have um, as they begin their journey.
This project, it made me see very clearly like what I would do if I was 20 just starting out. And what I see, I have an assistant editor who's just killer. Their name is M, and M's very young in their career. And I say, oh, Martin, our cinematographer, he is what I would say students should aspire to be, because he can do it all. Like, to me, that's what it takes now. Like, you look at these positions, like in every sporting event, every high level, whether it's the NFL, the NBA, the MLB, all of those, they have these positions that you're not just taking still photos anymore. You're doing everything. You're taking video, you're taking stills, you have to upload it right away. It's got to go to wherever it's got to go seconds after it happens. The time matters, right? As soon as it happens, whoever gets it out first wins the race. It's just part of the game. Not that we maybe necessarily like that, but that's the world. And being able to do it all, and being able to edit your own work, like learn it all. Like, we lived now to be, what, 100 years old, right? If everything goes right, you have plenty of time, I'd say. And the way Martin does it, he's not just a jack of all trades where he's just getting by. He's really good at it. He's good at the technical side. And if he could be a one-man band, if he wants to go out and make a documentary on his own, he can do it and cut it. That's cool as heck to me. Like, that's what I would give the advice of: go do all that. Why not?
Related, last question. How do you think that social media, because you were just touching on those deadlines, uh, how has that changed photography, filmmaking, storytelling?
Yeah, I mean, I think the older generations get pretty down on social media, and you can play both sides. Of course, there's ups and downs, there's good and bad to social media. All right. And we know a lot of the bad. But I also think there's a lot of good to social media. And I love seeing everybody's work. I think that's one great thing. I mean, the amount of ideas I get just from scrolling on my phone, like, oh, and I follow the photographers that I admire, and I see their work. Like, I just looked at all this Olympics work, and I say, oh, how can I do that in my way? That's a cool photo that could work in what I do. And I just think that it's so accessible now, and being able to see all of that is terrific. People say, oh, well, everybody thinks they're a photographer. Well, maybe, but why not, like, learn from so many? You don't have to follow all of them. Follow the ones that speak to you. So just being able to see all that work out there, and have all of this available to us is great. And then all the learning tools on social media, whether it's YouTube. And I mean, students can, besides learning in your classroom, like, if they have the motivation, they can get online and they can find almost anything. Like, you go to B&H and they teach you all this stuff for free. YouTube for free. Sony, they have, all you got to do is sign up for the, you don't have to be a Sony user, and you can have all of these classes. There's so much out there. It's pretty incredible.
It's gone by so quickly, Gene. I
Is it
can't
over?
thank you enough for being a part of the project. I swear I could hold you captive for another hour and a half, but I really appreciate your time. Um, I look forward to all your other endeavors. Can't wait to see them.
Oh, so kind of you. Thank you. I got to get back to Canton, Ohio. I haven't been there for a long time.
Many thanks to the extremely talented Jean Fruth. You can check out her work at grassrootsbaseball.org and on all of her social media channels. The Zoom with Our Feet podcast is a production of TV Commando Media. The ZoomPod theme is by Novembers and their funky groove, Cloud 10. Until next time, photographers, if you're not shooting, you're not learning.